In this video, we're going to learn how to perform various CRUD operations such as the create, update, and delete operations using Hibernate. So as you can see here, I have an existing Java project in which I have Hibernate already configured. So I have my hibernate.cfg.xml file here containing the various connection properties to my Oracle database. I have a Hibernate util class here which I will use to establish connections to that database. I have a class here called person, which essentially maps to the person table I have using annotations. And I have a person DAO class here, which is of particular interest because this is essentially allowing us to perform those create, update, and delete operations. So if I simply walk you through the implementation of this class here, I have a save person method, which takes an instance of person. I then start in the implementation here by establish a connection. So hibernate util.getSessionFactory.openSession. I then start a transaction. So transaction equals session.beginTransaction. And I then pass the person object to a call of save or update on the session object here. So all of this is essentially wrapped in a try, catch, and finally construct. And inside the catch block here, I'm catching a Hibernate exception, and we will essentially call transaction.rollback, which allows us to roll back any transactions so that we do not leave our database in an inconsistent state. So again, transaction.rollback. And of course, anytime when we establish a connection to a database, we want to close that connection. So in the finally block here, I have essentially called transaction.commit, which will persist the data that we had saved, and it will then call session.close. And another method that I have inside the person DAO class here is a method called delete person, and as you can imagine, inside the implementation here, we call session.delete instead of session.save or update, but everything else essentially remains the same. So we open a connection, we start a transaction, we roll back in the event of an exception, and if everything goes well, we commit that data and then we close the connection. All right, so now to sort of demonstrate that this DAO works, I'm going to go to my main class here, and inside my main method, I'm going to create an instance of person, and I am then going to create an instance of the person DAO class. So person DAO equals new person DAO, and we are going to invoke the save person method on person DAO, and we're going to pass it the instance of person. All right, now if I run this application, you'll ultimately see in the console here that we have some SQL output, which we accomplished inside the Hibernate configuration file by having a property called show_SQL and setting the property to true. And that essentially causes Hibernate to output any of the SQL that it generates. So back to the main method here. So we've called save person. Now if I load the person table, you'll see that I have a record in here, and I have an ID of 1, and the first name is John, and the last name is Smith. Now if I actually go ahead now and make a slight modification to the main method here, so now that we have ultimately updated or inserted the person record, we want to now update it. So we can actually accomplish this by simply modifying the person object. So we can do person dot, in this case I'm going to actually modify the last name, so person.set last name, and we're going to set the last name to Doe. All right, now if I rerun the application, again you'll see the SQL output from Hibernate, and if I reload the person table, you'll see that the record was updated, or the last name field was updated to Doe as we had implemented in our main method. Now lastly, what I want to do is actually delete the person from the database. So I can do person DAO.delete person. And again, if I run the application, you'll see the delete SQL inside your console. And if I reload the person table, that person will ultimately get deleted. And that's essentially all there is to performing various CRUD operations such as the create, update, and delete operations using Hibernate.